I'm Rachel P. and I'm going to be doing my informative speech.
I'm Sheila.
I'm Steven.
Haley. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Maddie.
Do you ever look up at the stars and wonder what's out there? Out in the universe we've barely scratched the surface of? I know I do. I often look up with fascination, just thinking and pondering. It's difficult to fathom that we live on this tiny blue planet in the middle of a vast universe. But I want to know what's out there, to explore the unknown. And as it seems, I am not alone in this wonder. Buzz Aldrin states that exploration is wired into our brains. If we can see the horizon, we want to know what's beyond it. And I've found that one of the biggest beyonds humans have had is space. So today, I want you to sit back, relax, and try to enjoy some of the history we have made in space. As members of this universe, we are obligated to open our eyes, to try and understand where we live. You don't have to become a rocket scientist or an astronaut to understand and appreciate the galaxy for what it is either. We're living in a world that's taking big strides towards the future, and I see a future of exploring the stars. If we're going to get there and go further than ever before, we have to understand some of the history behind space exploration. Today we will be addressing 3 very important questions. Why did humans start exploring? What are some of the biggest milestones that have occurred in our voyages? And finally, what are some of the future outlooks on space exploration? To understand any aspect of what we've done in space, we first have to take a look at what got us there in the first place. So why did we start exploring? Was it curiosity, fascination, and appreciation for the unknown? Well, the number one reason why humans started exploring the unknown was the space race. And what is the space race? According to an article written by the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum titled Space Race, the space race erupted as a result of the conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union in the Cold War. Space was the theater for this so-called war, and both sides competed fiercely to outdo the other in their advancements in technological aspects involving spacecrafts. When did the space race occur? According to Roald Sagdiv and Susan Eisenhower, they explored when the space race began in their article, United States-Soviet Space Cooperation During the Cold War, and estimated that it roughly spanned between the years 1957 and 1991. Both Khan Academy's article, The Start of the Space Race, and History lists 6 key events of the space race, go on to explain some of the key events that occurred in this race to space. The first would be in 1957, when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite to go into space. They then followed up with Sputnik 2 and 3. In response to this, the United States formed the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA for short, on October 1st, 1958. They were a federal agency responsible for aerospace research, and they aimed to launch a manned vehicle into Earth's orbit as soon as possible. The Soviet Union then launched Vostok 1 in 1961, and Yuri Gagarin became the first man to ever get into space and orbit the Earth. The U.S. responded to this 1 month later with Mercury Redstone 3, and Alan Shepard became the first American man into space. President John F. Kennedy then announced the Apollo program, which planned to launch a man into space and land on the moon. The U.S. Apollo 11 in 1969 became the first successful moon landing, and Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin became the first men on the moon. The race then wound down after the U.S. moon landing because, according to Sagdiv and Eisenhower, the Soviet Union experienced a series of failures in its manned lunar program. The success of Apollo 11 ended the Soviet leadership of space exploration. How did this spur on exploration? The Khan Academy article again states that for the U.S., early Soviet successes had a major impact on society and culture and led to new educational initiatives. NASA was formed, and people wanted to know what was out there. Now that you know more about what triggered the desire for us to explore space, we can move on to discuss several important milestones in our voyages. We've already covered Sputnik 1, Vostok 1, Mercury Redstone 3, and Apollo 11, so I'm going to keep them out for the sake of brevity. But other important milestones I found were listed in the History List article I referenced before, an article titled Women in Space by Stephen Garber, as well as an article titled Key Dates in History of Space Exploration by the Associated Press. The first I will talk about is Explorer 1. The U.S.'s first artificial satellite was Explorer 1, and it was launched January 31st, 1958, and it established our place in the space race, and it gathered important atmospheric data for the United States.
Vostok 6 is the next that I will talk about, and this is very, very special to me because it was the first woman in space. Valentina Tereshkova became the first woman in space on June 16, 1963. And then Skylab 1 was the first U.S. orbiting lab, and it was launched May 14, 1973, and it was a precursor to what we have now, which is the International Space Station. The next important milestone would be STS-7 with Sally Ride on board, the first American woman in space, the third woman overall, and she was in space from June 18th to the 24th of the year 1983. Finally, in What is the International Space Station, Brian Dunbar states that the creation of the International Space Station was a vitally important milestone in our exploration of space. It's a science lab where astronauts can live and study, and it's put together by multiple countries around the world. Not just the US, not just the Soviet Union, but many. And it was constructed between 1998 and 2000. The first crew arrived November 2nd, 2000. I could go on and on, listing important milestones within space travel, but we would be here forever. There have been countless important moments in the exploration of space. Now that you're up to date on some of the biggest highlights of our journeys, it's now time to take a look at some of the future outlooks on space exploration. The first is space tourism. Virgin Galactic is one of the biggest space tourism companies that I know of up to date. According to their website in a section titled Vision, they're a company that aims to transform the current cost, safety, and environmental impact of space launch. They want to create basic space access infrastructure for scientists and entrepreneurs, not just the experts. The CEO of this company, George Whiteside, states that new space technologies developed by private companies will bring about fundamental change that will influence business and our personal lives. They want to put civilians in space, and that's awesome. NASA also holds many future outlooks on space exploration, but theirs is more of a scientific expert side. On NASA's website, an article titled "What's Next for NASA" explores a few of their goals. Mars is one. They are planning many future expeditions to Mars, and they state that the Mars 2020 rover will look for signs of past microbial life, gather samples for future return to Earth, and investigate resources that could someday support astronauts on Mars. Looking outside of our solar system is also one of their goals. In April of 2018, NASA launched the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, or TESS for short, to search for planets outside of our solar system, not just inside of it. Finally, one of their main goals for the future is to further explore deep space. They want to put humans into deep space. NASA's powerful space launch rocket system will carry astronauts to the moon, where they will build and begin testing systems needed for missions to Mars and deeper into space. So not just to Mars, but beyond. They're also studying astronauts living in space for 6 or more months, and this is to learn how future crews can thrive on longer missions into the solar system. The International Space Station is, in their words, a test bed for exploration technologies. As you can tell, the future for space exploration is as bright and vast as the universe itself. With this in mind, I hope that you have learned more about what we as humans have accomplished in our journeys. Now that we've explored why humans decided to go into space, what some of the biggest milestones in our journeys have been, and finally, what the future outlook for exploration looks like, I hope that you will hold a greater appreciation for the mysteries our galaxy holds. We're all residents of this big blue planet in the middle of a sea of stars. We sit in a trove of treasures just waiting to be discovered. That being said, as relatively small beings in this infinitely large universe, we are obligated to hold respect for what is out there, what we don't know yet, and what we have the potential to discover. I invite you to take a moment every now and then. Take a look up at the night sky and appreciate what is up there. Take a moment to watch the breathtaking constellations as they twinkle through the night, the moon as it waxes and wanes, and the slight glimpses we get of distant planets as they spin around us. As Stephen Hawking once said, remember to look up at the stars and not down at your feet. Thank you.